So, is it up to Bashar al-Assad to fill the void left by the United States in northeast Syria? 1 week after Donald Trump's shock decision to pull out, the Kurds have had to go cap in hand to Damascus for help. The end of their dream of an autonomous region? Most probably. Will it be enough to even stave off the Turks, with Assad's soldiers now agreeing to deploy to the border? Does that thwart Ankara's plan to resettle a buffer zone with Syrian Arab refugees? Or will it be full speed ahead for what Kurds claim will be large-scale ethnic cleansing? With the U.S. out, there are other players in this equation. Assad's managed to stay in power thanks to support from Moscow and Tehran. Will Russia, which doesn't want ISIS fighters going its way, actively back Assad at the border? If so, where would that leave those mended relations with Turkey? Turkey, which despite arms embargoes and condemnation from the West, still remains, let's not forget, a full member of NATO. Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at the race to the border in northeast Syria. With us, retired General Dominique Trinquant, former head of France's military mission to the United Nations. Thanks for joining us. Thanks as well to Yusuf Arim, who joins us from Istanbul, commentator for TRT World. Thank you for being with us. Aria Jemo of the advocacy group Hope for Afrin is with us as well. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
And France 24's Wasim Nasser.
Thank you.
The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. After the deal reached late Sunday, Syrian state television broadcasting images of government troops Monday entering the strategically key town of Tel Tamer after Turkish shelling. It's on that east-west M4 highway that Turkish forces claim to have seized, and just 35 kilometers southeast of Ras al-Ain, where the fighting has been intense during the past week. A lot of what we piece together when inside of Syria, Wasim Nasser, is when it comes to what's actually happening on the ground, because we hear claims and counterclaims, is through activists that are on the ground. What's the picture we're getting right now?
Well, actually, the Turks, with their allies of Syrian allies, like militias that they are arming and training and equipping, entered on 3 points around the city of Tal Abyad, which they took, Ras Lain, and another point in the last hours, and they evoluted in some villages with, we should say, very little opposition, because we are in the Arab corridor. We are not at the east of Kamishli, where is the heartland of the Kurdish community in Syria, neither in the region of Kobani, which is very significant for the Kurds. And they are evolving there with recruits that they got from refugee camps, but also with people originally from those regions, which know those regions. And so up to now, it's very limited on the ground. And today, they had another axis developing around the town of Manbij, because there's a race for Manbij between the Syrian army and those Syrian rebels working on behalf of the Turks. But the broker of all this is still, we shouldn't forget, that the green light was given by Vladimir Putin, which we heard about in the subject earlier. Because Erdogan is doing this, not to say on behalf of Russia, but what he's doing is also in the interest of Russia on one hand, because Russia since 2015, 2016 wants to push out the West from Syria.
But that's done. That was last week. Now it's this week.
Yes,
so now that the West is gone, is it still the same equation?
It's the same equation, because the West is not gone yet. Yeah. And because the Kurds are being forced to go see their interest with Damascus, as they did in Afrin. Because in Afrin, Damascus made big declarations like they are doing now, but at the end of the day, they sent a few militiamen to back up the YPG there without air support from Russia. And at the end of the day, Turkey took Afrin. And today we are witnessing the same equation there. Damascus is making big declarations, running for towns at Tel Tamer, and Tel Tamer where American special forces left like a few days ago. But at the end of the day, they wouldn't go very far without air support. If they don't have the support of the Russians, in the air, they won't be able to face the Turkish army, which has the means to implement what it wants in this region. And when we know that Putin is okay with this military enterprise done by the Turks, we can imagine that as an Afrin, they won't have military air support.
We saw by the cautious statements out of the Kremlin last week that Putin was, as Wasim says, tacitly okay with it. Is it still the case now, though, General Tankon?
I think that the Turks will have a problem, and we will see what will be the reaction of the Russian and the Syrian army, because achieving one goal like taking a city roughly easy with tanks and weapon system and all that, but keep them is another matter. The Kurds soldiers are very good at fight eyes in eyes with small weapons, with anti-tank weapons, and this is what will happen after a few days when they will want to fight, and at that time we will see really if the Syrian will support them or not, because at the end it's an invasion. First point. Second point. The reason given by Mr. Erdogan is to send the Syrian refugee there. In international law, he has no right to do that. If the refugees which are managed by UNHCR are in Iraq, he's got no right to put them in an area which is not prepared to receive them in Turkey, in Syria. In Syria, he wants to send back in Syria in an area which is not their area and where nothing is prepared to receive them. So he will have a big difficulty first to move this Syrian refugee from Turkey to Syria. Secondly, he will have a major problem staying in the area with the
because we don't know
the Kurdish fighting.
We don't know at this point what are the contours of the deal that was struck between Damascus and Syria's Kurds.
No, I think
what is being said actually, what is being said is that the Syrian army will be deployed at the border. But at the end of the day, the Kurds are
in exchange for what, though?
They will lose the administration because Assad wants it all or nothing.
He
wouldn't bargain on this. All the richness of Syria and agricultural terms and oil terms are in the east, in areas controlled today by the YPG, and Assad wants this back. And without those resources, the YPG won't be able to maintain itself, especially without any American funding. So they will lose their administration.
Arya Gemma, what's the bargain?
Well, the Kurds feel betrayed indeed, and it would be the goal of Assad would be really to take over the administration of Rojava, so the peaceful and the tolerant administration that allow all the different ethnies and all the different religions to live together in peaceful in this part of the world that is really difficult currently. And but the deal with Assad is a big alarm and a big sign of a political failure from the US and the Europe. They definitely, we can say that they have lost the Syrian war. They have lost the Kurdish allies that were serving the interest of the Europe and the US.
Is it over for Kurdish autonomy in the northeast of Syria?
Well, we can't say right now. I called someone in Komeshlo a few hours ago, and currently the agreement seems to be only about collaboration on the ground with the army to block the invasion from the jihadists and Turkey. And yeah, so I was saying the US and Europe definitely lost the Syrian war. They lost the Kurdish allies that were serving their interest over there. They lost Assad is still there. The jihadist groups active there and in Europe now, and the Turkey's supposed ally is getting more dictatorial, more fascist, and more ambiguous on his position.
Yusuf Erim, does it change the strategy in Ankara, this deal between Bashar al-Assad and the Syrian Kurds?
Francois, I'm listening and I've been itching to jump in now. First, I'd like to correct the Honorable General. This is not an invasion. The Turkish troops are there in an advise and assist role with their local partners, the Syrian National Army. Second thing, any type of deal that the YPG cuts with Assad, I highly doubt will impact Turkey's military operation because Turkey's already set forth a safe zone that they want to control and repatriate at least 1, maybe even 2 million refugees. And that safe zone is 480 kilometers long and 32 kilometers deep. Now, the northeast area that was underneath the YPG control as part of the U.S. coalition is a large swath of land, and Turkey has no eyes on anything past the 32-kilometer mark. And I highly doubt the regime would want any type of showdown with opposition forces who have proven...
That 32-kilometer mark that you mentioned is where most of the population of northeast Syria lives.
That is the M4 highway, and north of the M4 highway, there is obviously very big cities in the south, Raqqa, Deir ez-Zor, a couple other cities. But Turks are very, very intent. So is the opposition on taking control of north of the M4. And I highly doubt that the regime would want to risk any type of confrontation. I don't think that the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, wants to upset Turkey right now. He's said many times that Turkey has legitimate security concerns. He's recognizing these concerns. We see the power of the Syrian National Army as the YPG is crumbling in Tel Abyad. The YPG is crumbling in Rasul Ain. The Syrian National Army has already taken 3 villages in Manbij, and it looks like Manbij will be liberated by tomorrow, before tomorrow's over, despite regime forces supposedly making a move for Manbij. So the Syrian National Army and Turkish forces are moving in a very cohesive manner. And judging from President Erdogan's comments earlier today, Ain al-Arab, or as the Kurds like to call it, Kobani, looks like it will be the next stop for this military offensive into the northeast.
Let's listen to Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He says the next objective is the Arab-majority town of Manbij, under the rule of the Kurdish-led SDF, and despite claims that Syrian forces are to deploy both there and to the border town of Kobani, for Turkey, well, it's full steam ahead.
We are about to implement our decision on Manbij. As you know, our mutual agreement with the United States regarding Manbij was that terrorist organizations were going to evacuate the town within 90 days. But a year has passed and Manbij has not been evacuated. When the city is evacuated, Turkey won't go there. The rightful owners, our Arab brethren, will be going there. And our approach on this issue is for them to go there and provide for their own security.
All right, Gemma, what's going to happen in Manbij, which is an Arab-majority town?
Well, we know what's going to happen. The same things that happened in Afrin a year ago. So the jihadists will be released and making massacre everywhere in the cities. They will steal the house, steal the property, and a lot of people will flee and become refugee. And this refugee, we already know where they will go.
Let me ask you, General Trinquant, you heard Yusuf Erim saying that there is this tacit green light. Again, we get back to the subject of Vladimir Putin. At this point in time, though, once there is the move by the Turkish-backed forces on Manbij, on Kobani, will it still be this tacit approval?
I don't understand the tacit agreement making that the government of Syria will take back control of this area, which was de facto autonomous, if they are not pushing out the Turks. I mean, a legal government can't accept a foreign army without his agreement in the country.
But can't he afford it? That's
Sorry?
the thing. Can't he afford it? He cannot.
No, that's another
He is
subject.
totally tributary of what Russia decides.
But that's another
So what's in
subject.
Vladimir Putin's interest at this point?
I think that Vladimir Putin has another problem, is Idlib, where there is an agreement between the Turks and the Russian, and we know that it is not working.
It's all the same agreement, actually.
Yes, but I mean, it is not working on the Idlib. Why it will be working in this area, in the Turkish area, in the Kurds area? I mean, the problem is that the plan, a long-standing plan from Mr. Erdogan, was to go there, and who can stop him? If the Americans are saying we are going out, can Putin stop him? He is not in a position to stop to have the agreement working in Idlib. He has, I think, no means to stop the Turkish if they want to go in the south. So I think the problem is the balance is that no one is able to stop someone who wants to force the decision in Syria currently, and. It does. I mean, the Russians don't want to fight the Turks. Why? Because mainly the Turks are part of NATO, and it's a sort of game showing to NATO and to the US, look, your allied in Turkey is working with us, the Russian, and not with you, which is something impossible to think about it. But in fact, it's happening. So I think the game is really a big game in that, but currently my point is just that the Turkish army, will go in this area. My point is that it will be very difficult to achieve what they want to achieve, to send the refugee there first, and to occupy this area where the Kurds don't want them. It will be very difficult for them. That's my point.
Well, actually, if they keep evolving in the Arab majority areas, I think they will be able to do it, because you have to know also that the YPG expanded beyond its natural reach, because it was backed by the West in order to fight the jihadis.
So to fight the jihadis.
Yes, exactly. So it evolved on areas where it is Arab majority, and many Arab tribes joined the YPG at the time because they were good pays, because sometimes they were recruited, and because the YPG was the strongest. So this is the way it goes there. Now that the YPG is getting weaker, some of them will leave him and to join the other strongest on the ground, which can be Turkey or Assad. But the thing is here, what has Russia to gain? Russia has to gain is kicking out the Westerners. What Damas has to gain? Damas has to gain is destroy the administration and get back its rich areas. What Iran has to gain is to keep standing in the east. And what has Turkey to gain? Its buffer zone and preventing the entity which can work with the PKK in Turkey from living.
So what you're describing are years and years of further along of a continued kind of stalemate.
Actually, what I'm trying to say is that, the Americans aren't the brokers today. Today, the brokers are the Russians on the ground, and everybody has the same interest at this point of time in the success of this Turkish campaign. It might change tomorrow, but today it's the case.
All right, we'll pick up on that point with the rest of our panel, get reactions. When we come back, you're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're seeing how the pieces in the puzzle are shifting fast 1 week after Donald Trump's pullout of U.S. forces from northeast Syria. The Syrian military making its way to the border after a Sunday deal with the Kurds, who are besieged by Turks, who are saying they're going to expand their campaign across the border. With us, retired General Dominique Trinquant, former head of the French military mission to the United Nations. From Istanbul, Yusuf Erim, commentator for the TRT World, Aria Jemo of the advocacy group Hope for Afrin, and France 24's very own Wassim Nasser. The U.S. President Donald Trump has been tweeting the past hours, most notably over words of escaped ISIS fighters. This is what he said earlier. He said, Kurds may be releasing some to get us involved, easily recaptured by Turkey or European nations from where many came, but they should move quickly. Big sanctions on Turkey coming, exclamation point. Do people really think we should go to war with NATO member Turkey? Never-ending wars will end. There's a lot in that tweet, Yusuf Erim. If you're Turkish, should you be worried, not worried when you read it?
I take it with a grain of salt, a pinch of salt. I highly doubt the United States is going to sanction Turkey for this operation because President Trump has already expressed that there are legitimate concerns. He's the one that talked about a 20-mile depth in this operation. And President Erdogan is going to be in D.C. November 13th to be discussing the operation with his American counterpart. So I don't expect any type of sanctions, at least until President Erdogan and Trump meet. But I do want to touch on a couple things now. When you came back from the break, you called this a puzzle, and it is a puzzle, and the pieces are starting to fit together. Now, we talked a lot about Russia and Assad earlier in the program, and I think one of the things that people don't understand is all the major players left in the game now, the regime, Russia, Turkey, the opposition, and Iran, putting the YPG to one side, all want to protect the territorial integrity of Syria. And this military operation right now is neutralizing the major threat to that territorial integrity. So while Assad may oppose this operation, and Russia may not be too happy, these are compromises that they're going to be willing to make because in the long run, it's going to help Assad, it's going to help Russia keep the territorial integrity of Syria intact. Now we're heading towards a political solution process. The Constitutional Committee is formed, and any type of threat to the territorial integrity could derail that political solution process. And while Assad is concerned about Turkish presence in Syria, Turkish presence is most likely inevitably going to end with an Adana agreement, an agreement that was formed in 1998 that Putin has touched upon in previous Astana meetings. We'll probably see a revised version of this Adana agreement in a year or two where either the Assad regime or a predecessor, a future version of the Assad regime or a newly elected government or Turkish forces will have a joint patrol rights to the area along the Turkish border to neutralize any type of threat emanating to Turkey. And if I have some time just to touch on Idlib for a second, the major problem in Idlib is Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or the HTS. They're entrenched in that area. There's 3 million civilians. It's causing a huge problem between Turkey and Russia. It's very hard to perform operations against HTS because of the immense amount of civilians in the area. And there's also a big problem because of the M4 and M5 highways that run through there, which would be a lifeline to the regime. The regime is hurting commercially. They want those highways completely opened. They are right now in the control of HTS. It remains what type of deal is going to be cut between Russia and Turkey in the future, but the HTS is a serious problem for all the players in that area that need to be solved.
Wasim Nasser, remind our viewers, what is HTS?
HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, it's a group which was formerly Jabhat al-Nusra, which was like the Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria. It's no longer today the case. They even have fights with Al-Qaeda. They're imprisoning Al-Qaeda representative in Idlib, talking about HTS. And HTS does politics, so it's really entrenched within the population. And as it was said, it is true. During the Astana agreement, it was said that Turkey should take care of HTS. But it's a very difficult case because HTS is too strong in this region. So it's negotiating with Turkey on a political level, so doing politics. It's no longer a jihadi group, but it's an extremist group. So this is the nuance that we should have.
But extremist groups are promoting violence, and you're going to commit this violence with armed group and supporting them.
Yes, but HTS didn't agree on, is not involved in the Turkish operations. This is a very important point. And Al-Qaeda affiliates in Idlib even are saying that Turkey should be attacked and nobody should fight under the Turkish banner, and even those who are fighting from the rebels under Turkish banner are apostates and should be killed. So we close this bracket about the jihadi groups. And on the other hand, we see that even the Turkish operation today, which is happening or evolving since 5 days, is also like an emanation of the Astana deal. The Astana deal is Turkey has to take control of this border to manage this border on behalf of the Russians. And what was said also about the Adana deal is also very important because of the Adana deal, Öcalan was kicked away from Syria, and
the head of the PKK.
Yes, the head of the PKK. So and eventually caught by Turkey. So the historic depths of this issue is also to be taken into consideration, because when it comes to the interests of states and governments, the ones who are gonna pay the price are irregular actors, meaning the YPG on one hand and jihadi extremists on the other. Because at the end of the day, those capitals will get together and will find a solution that suits them and not the irregular actors.
All right, Jimo.
Yeah, I would like just to come back on the Donald Trump tweet. The Kurds would never release ISIS prisoner because the day right after they would massacre Kurdish people and would take weapons to kill the Kurdish forces. So this is no test. This come
Because there are some that escaped over the weekend. We saw that.
Yeah, after bombing of Turkey, opening the prison. But the thing is, this tweet came after a propaganda video that came from the Turkish television. Showing in Tel Abyad operation that you see the military going inside a prison, apparently a prison, but there is no prison of ISIS in Tel Abyad. So that was staged. And Donald Trump is listening to a Turkish propaganda. This is not working.
No, but regarding the prisons, we should know without putting any judgment that when there is a prison on a war zone, when the war zone changes hands, the prison is open. Either it's Turkey, the Kurds, the Americans, the Iraqi, whatever. So anyways, the YPG couldn't kept those prisons
Because there's
closed or couldn't guard them because he was fighting the Turks.
There is
so
this
de facto,
yeah, but they won't release
prison,
them to use it as a pressure for the US and the Europe.
That's another issue. But at the end of the day, they won't be able to keep them. So prisons will be open. That's it.
Because of the Turkish invasion.
I agree. The Kurds fighter, anyway, if they want to fight, they will not have sufficient manpower to keep the prison, capture. And so there will be people, it's not intentionally, but there will be people, already people have been escaped. Also, we must understand, because they were very well organized inside the camp, and they organized the way they were going out. So this is a major concern, because these people are very dangerous. Even, I must say, the wife and the children who are dangerous in this camp.
Because you have prisons like the one in Kashmiri, which is near the border, which
you have many facilities. You have prisons, highly guarded prisons. You have camps. Okay, from one range to another, you have small prisons where most high-value targets are imprisoned, and camps where you can find
like the one like at Ain Issa, which is further south, where where families escaped.
And the Americans succeeded to move 2 British nationals who killed an American hostage, but they didn't succeed to move more people. And the case is that today we talk about like families of jihadis, but we have to be a little bit accurate, because sometimes in this region, I'm speaking about Arab population, it's the family, the extended family, and even the village. So the camps where people are kept, because we don't know if they support really or not the jihadis, knowing that core jihadis are among them. That's on one hand. On the other hand, the Islamic State very particularly conducted operations next to Al-Hol camp yesterday. It attacked an American barracks in Shadadi the day before yesterday. So they are very active, and one of their primary objectives is to liberate their own, meaning families and jihadis. Prison breaking is part of the core ideology of the Islamic State.
Wasim Nasser,
Turkey.
You research jihadi movements. Do we have a clear idea, A, of how many jihadis there are, and B, again, picking up on Donald Trump's tweet, what nationalities they are?
A, no.
Well, you could say 11,000.
B, what nationalities? There are many nationalities. The ones who took back their own are the Americans and the Russians. The Europeans didn't want to take back their own, and this is a very big problem. We said this here at France 24 2 years ago, and with you, that European countries should take their responsibilities and take back the jihadis.
And the Kurds even asked
today, what's happening, the jihadis are being used as leverage, either by the Iraqi government, at one point even for the Kurds, because they wanted recognition, which is normal, and they could be used today by other entities like Assad. Regarding Turkey, we have what we call the Cazeneuve Protocol, the former prime minister, which allows Turkey to extradite the jihadis with families. It's working since 2014 towards France. So today the point is, some jihadi families are willing to stay in the camps, even evacuated by the YPG, to be handled by the Turks. So this is an evolving issue.
It's an evolving issue, but Dominique Trinquant, we saw as late as last Friday, again, the French... Just one question, well, just one point here, General Trinquant. We saw as late as last Friday, the French government again state that jihadis should be, or those who've committed crimes, should be tried where the crimes were committed. In other words, they don't want their ISIS prisoners back. Is that going to evolve?
It has been always the French position, which is very difficult to sustain, because if it's in Syria, will you hand these people to the Syrian government? I don't think that the French government will do that. So to put them in Iraq, it was the case for certain of them. But I think that the problem is that the French government think that if they are coming back in France, they will have a very small sentence, and then in 5 or 6 years they will be back in the city. And that's where they were frightened. But I think that the position would have been more
Is it going to change now with what's happening?
I think they will have no chance. They will have to change it because the people will be in the ground, in the field.
Yusuf Arim?
I just want to ask, who are the jihadis? Is everyone saying jihadis? They're painting huge, broad brushstrokes. Is everyone that supports Turkey a jihadi? Is the whole Syrian opposition jihadi? Is 30% of the Syrian population jihadi? Can we make some type of distinguishing label? I mean, I don't understand. Everyone's just saying jihadi this, jihadi that. It shouldn't be so easy to just label people jihadi. I mean, we have to realize there's 6 million people under Turkish protection in Syria, 3.6 million Syrian refugees in Turkey. You have the Syrian National Army as Turkey's local partner. Turkey's representing and guaranteeing a guarantor for the Syrian opposition, but all I'm hearing is jihadis. So what is this? It's the Assad regime on one side versus the jihadis and the Kurds. I mean, it's not the Kurds. It's the YPG that Turkey has a problem with. The YPG, the Kurds make 7 to 8% of Syria's population, and the YPG gets around 15%, maximum 20% support from Syrian Kurds. So you're talking about a very small, marginalized group that happens to have all the guns and the money in their hand and that are speaking much louder than the rest of the Syrian Kurds. So when you paint a broad brushstroke for such a marginalized group and call them the Kurds, and then all of a sudden call all the opposition jihadi, this really distorts the conversation.
Arya Jamo?
Yeah, you mentioned that you mentioned. Well, yeah, you can.
Well, actually, just to be clear, jihadis are those waging international jihad, meaning Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. Point. We don't go any further than this. In my opinion, working on this issue since almost 10 years now. And on the other hand, of course, the YPG is one component. This is the reality today. When Turkey decides to strike in Kandil Mountain in Iraq, it does it in coordination with the Iraqi Kurdistan authorities. So this is also the reality of the thing. And what was made in order to be able for the Western countries to support the YPG is to dissociate it from the PKK. Okay, which is the mothership, if I may say so. But Donald Trump, in his latest declaration, for the first time, talked about the PKK when he was talking about the YPG. So this wording is a game changer today, because as you know, the PKK is labeled as a terrorist organization by the European Union and by the United States. So when President Trump said PKK talking about the YPG, he's putting in very much difficulty his own troops in Syrian soil. So we see that this is a real game changer today. This should be taken into consideration.
Because in fact, this wording from Mr. Trump is the wording of Mr. Erdogan.
Exactly.
Yes, and which is in part also we have to say, which is in part the reality. Many commanders of the YPG are commanders of the PKK, and they are trained by them, they are armed by them, and they have the same ideology. So we shouldn't get away from reality just to accommodate the allies that
should the YPG be doing more? The YPG is be doing more to distance itself from the PKK.
Well, the pretext of going into Syria and into Rojava to fight the YPG was also one of the pretexts used to invade Afrin. What happened in Afrin? Then, if you really go into YPG for the YPG, then why did you give new ID card, Turkish one, translated to my people? Why did you destroy my house? Why did you steal my house? Why did you destroy the grave of my family? If it's just the YPG, the pro and the YPG, why do you do all other massacre and atrocity then? Below this pretext of YPG, supposedly terrorists that is keeping Rojava a place where all the religion and ethnicity can live in peace, there is just a racism against the Kurdish that is staying since centuries now. That's the real reason of this invasion. It's not the YPG, and we know that. The Kurds know that, and the people in the region know that. They were living in peace with the YPG. They're apparently terrorists. They're apparently terrorists.
President Erdogan tried to launch a peace operation with the PKK, a peace process, back in 2014. And it would have been a very, very, very successful peace process had Obama not gone and torpedoed this process by joining forces with the YPG. And then after this, the YPG and the PKK, both the Syrian and the Turkish affiliates of the same organization, the PKK abandoned this peace process in hopes of gaining autonomy in Syria. If there was no partnering with U.S. forces and the YPG, there could be a completely different relationship right now. The PKK could quite possibly have left its arms. The YPG could have completely gone political with the PYD. That would have been one scenario. A second scenario, which was very mishandled by Brett McGurk, the anti-ISIS coalition leader, the head envoy, he had 5 years to clean the SDF up from YPG presence. He knew the Turks were bothered. There's many statements where he admits that Turkey is bothered by YPG presence. He had 5 years to fix the problem, and yet he did nothing. He convinced the Americans that the SDF wasn't the YPG, but he never convinced the Turks.
Yusuf, we're running short on time. I want to get your reaction to breaking news, which is Syrian state television reporting that the Syrian army has entered Manbij. I have to ask the question we asked at the outset. Does that stop Turkey from attacking the town?
That's not Turkey's call. I think that's going to be the Syrian opposition and the Syrian National Army's call, because in the end, throughout the 3 years of the Syrian conflict, Turkey has never militarily engaged the regime. There's been maybe small skirmishes, mistaken fire, back and forth, but Turkey has never directly engaged the regime, and I highly doubt that Turkey will abandon that stance now. Turkey's not an invading force. Turkey has only fought Daesh in 2016 on Operation Euphrates Shield, and the YPG in Operation Olive Branch and Operation Peace Spring. And I do not think it will abandon this stance. That's the decision that the Syrian National Army and the Syrian opposition will have to make, what they want to do. But I still do not think that the regime will take Manbij. I highly believe that the Syrian opposition will control that area.
Wasim Nasser, again, this is Syrian state television reporting
have to see
that the Syrian army has entered the town.
It have to be taken seriously. They did the same about Afrin. They did the same about Tel Rifat in the same area of Aleppo. So we have to be careful. They might send some help for the YPG, but I don't think it will go up to sending regular troops, because actually there never had been a full-scale confrontation from the beginning of the war up to now between the Syrian army and the Turkish army. You had confrontation between proxies of both, but not direct confrontation.
Well, that was the point which was just made. It's not the Turkish army, just a proxy.
Exactly.
It's exactly the same. I mean, you send proxy instead of the Turkish army, but you are providing weapon training, communication, all the support, so it's exactly the same.
But it will be proxies on both sides, because I don't think that Damascus also wants to go to direct confrontation with the Turks up to now, because it's not that they don't have the will. They don't have the means.
Yeah, they don't have the means.
You see?
Exactly.
And the broker...
But there's a clear-cut question.
The broker is the Russian.
I was going to say, there's a clear-cut question which is put in part one of our discussion, which is, who controls the airspace going forward now? Does this change Russia's decision?
Initially, the air control was done by the Americans. So if there is a Turk operation, it's because the Americans have... take out the coordination, the three-dimension coordination. Then the second point, I completely agree. The broker is Russia, or the Russian. If they want to support the Assad government, they will send the aircraft. If not, they will not send the aircraft. And then without support, it will be very difficult, because the Turkish Air Force will be able to fight where there will be no U.S. and no Russian aircraft.
You know, the same scenario that unfolded in Afrin. That's it.
All right, we shall see how it unfolds. I want to thank Wasim Nasser. I want to thank as well General Dominique Trinquant, Aria Djemo for being with us, and Yusuf Arim for being with us from Istanbul. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to James Creedon.
Hi, François. So look at some reactions to various aspects of the debate topic tonight. First off, the suspension of arms sales by various European countries, France, Germany and the Netherlands, to Turkey. Some Turkish voices, or at least being raised here on social media in French, saying, well, this is somewhat hypocritical. Why are sympathisers of the PKK, an organisation that is classed as terrorist, being allowed to demonstrate on the streets? This seems to be a degree of hypocrisy if they're being given the opportunity to demonstrate, while France is in parallel suspending its arms sales to Turkey. And others have been picking up on that as well, and the fact that Macron has specifically said that the PKK is a terrorist organisation. So that's one line of debate or comment on social media regarding France's reaction to this. Others looking across the channel to the fact that London has decided not to suspend its arms sales to Turkey. Some condemning that, saying that it's disgusting, in the words of one Twitter user here, Mike Roberts Miller. Another saying that basically saying that this is the Tory government aiding and abetting the murder of the Kurdish people. So obviously a lot of emotion being expressed in people's reactions on social media. Many people feeling that the arms suspension was the right position. Again, cartoons as well expressing elements of that. And this is, again, a cartoon being shared by somebody who thinks that Boris Johnson should have followed France's, Germany's and the Netherlands' lead in that regard, and that this is Erdogan essentially being very aggressive towards the Kurdish population. Now, another point of view being expressed here is that the decision to suspend arms sales to Turkey was a pretty small sacrifice for France to make, given that it's pretty much symbolic, Turkey only being the 30th beneficiary of arms sales from France, way behind other countries where France continues to sell weapons, such as the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. Now, to move on to another topic that is generating a lot of comment, the football match. I suppose
these are images from last Friday, Turkey against Albania.
Right, and what was perceived by many as a military salute by the Turkish side, which many were very critical of. Various French voices saying that this is something that really should merit cancellation of the match.
Because tonight was France versus Turkey at the Stade de France.
Exactly. And so this military salute is chilling, as some would say. So really, a lot of people felt that that the match should have been cancelled. Le Drian, the Minister Le Drian, decided not to attend, but many felt that was not going far enough, in fact. This is Alexis Corbière, far-left politician here in France, who spoke on French TV tonight about the history of football, which is often linked to politics. I think it's possible to translate that tweet. It might be easier for viewers to see it. This would have repercussions if France were not to play tonight. It would be a strong gesture from his point of view that would have been watched around the world. Of course, that didn't happen. But there were calls for people to boycott the match, François, or even to make gestures to turn their backs on the national anthem. Other Turkish voices in France really appealing for everybody to be on their best behaviour this evening and to respect the national anthems and whatnot. So very much a political event, a political sporting event this evening between France and Turkey.
All right, many thanks, James Creedon. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24.